Well, good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to our meeting, regular council meeting for Monday, July 18th, 2022. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there a motion to approve our regular meeting minutes of July 5th?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass. And on those minutes, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Simon Harding for filling in for me on July 5th. Did a fantastic job while I was down at Camp Dodge for about almost 2 weeks. So with that, looking at agenda revisions, do you have any from your side, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the the proclamation under special presentations, item number 2, is being removed from the agenda.
Thank you. And I will read that in the next council meeting when we have the recipient on hand to receive that. So if no others, then we will skip past special presentations and go into public forum, where speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics relevant to city business. And for our first speaker tonight, we have Colonel Garrett Gingrich from the Iowa National Guard. His group was a recipient of a proclamation from last time, Iron Man Battalion Day. We have honored that every year for the past 3 years. Happy to do that going forward. And so for Colonel Gingrich, if you could introduce yourself, and the floor is yours, sir. We have a 5-minute limit, but I think you've earned a couple extra minutes if you need it. So go right ahead, sir.
I'll try to be under. Hey, thank you, Mayor. Honorable Mayor Green, distinguished city council members, and to the citizens of Cedar Falls, I wanted to come here and personally thank you for declaring July 11th Iron Man Battalion Day in Cedar Falls. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Gingrich. I'm an infantry officer and the current commander of the 1st Battalion, 133rd Infantry Regiment, known to many as the Iron Man Battalion. I am also a firefighter paramedic with Waterloo Fire Rescue. So I live here and work here in Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and that's why it's such an honor for me to be here to thank you for Iron Man Battalion Day. I'm a proud grunt of the Iron Man Battalion. For those of you that don't know, grunt is a term of endearment for an infantryman. An infantry soldier is the Army and Marine Corps' ground fighting soldier whose duty is to engage in close combat with our nation's enemies. My career and history as a soldier started here in Waterloo with the 1st Battalion, 133rd Infantry as a private, and 24 years later, I'm lucky enough to be the commander of this historic battalion. Most people in the area do not know the National Guard Infantry Battalion that is headquartered right here in Waterloo, Cedar Falls, is known as the Iron Man Battalion. The unit is one of the largest in the state and is comprised of 717 soldiers from companies located in Waterloo, Charles City, Olwine, Iowa Falls, Dubuque, Iowa City, and Davenport. The name Iron Man was given based upon the many of the soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 133rd Infantry, serving 611 consecutive days of combat in World War II. Can you imagine 611 consecutive days of combat in the hills and trenches of World War II? They landed in North Africa and fought the Germans through Africa and into Italy in some of the hardest fighting of the war. Although often overlooked throughout history by the D-Day landing into France, the southern front of the war fought with Germany through North Africa and Italy can be credited with allowing the western beach landings to be successful. Another fact, on January 26, 1942, a Bravo Company 133rd soldier, PFC Milburn Hankey, had his photograph seen across the country in newspapers as the first American soldier to step foot off the gangplank into the European theater of war in World War II. This same battalion, which is just a fragment of the 34th Infantry Red Bull Division, which comprises thousands of soldiers across 8 states in the Midwest, participated in the largest battle of the division since World War II, when in May 25th of 2011, 11 years ago, a group of 40 soldiers exited off 2 CH-47 helicopters onto a hot LZ and were ambushed in every direction by an estimated 400 to 500 Taliban. A 7-hour firefight ensued, and miraculously, no American lives were lost. An estimated 217 Taliban were killed, and the rest broke contact so that they could live another day. The amazing joint combination of Army infantry firepower, close combat attack aviation, Air Force close air support, and fearless determination allowed the 133rd Infantry to continue to live up to its given name, the Iron Man Battalion. For those of us that live around here, this should be a tremendous source of pride that such a fine organization is headquartered right here in this city. So again, thank you for honoring the Iron Man Battalion today. We appreciate the unconditional support that Cedar Falls has provided us throughout the years, and especially last year as we redeployed home from the Middle East. Mayor Green has been a tremendous advocate for our unit, so I especially want to thank you for your support of the battalion. I have 3 more months in command of the battalion, and I would love to see this declaration become a yearly reoccurrence as this historic battalion will continue to be a fixture that stands in this area. To the citizens of Cedar Falls, if you know young people that are seeking a principled organization that provides purpose, discipline, work ethic, and value in all that they do, please have them explore the Iron Man Battalion as an option to serve their community and country. The Iron Man Battalion and the Iowa National Guard will remain always ready. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. You'll have to run the gauntlet now since you've got one. Thank you. And I was honored back in April to visit with the Iron Man Battalion during their morning drill on a Saturday morning. Spent about 3 hours with them. And I think that really impressed me most about their operation was seeing National Guard soldiers truly are soldiers. It's not the weekend warrior mentality that maybe it was 30, 40 years ago. These are professional soldiers that have the challenge of also having a full-time day job on top of that. And the equipment they use is superb. And I'm so thankful for the leadership that Colonel Gingrich provides. So it looks like he had another obligation, but glad to have him here tonight. And with that, take us over for public forum. Does anyone else wish to speak in public forum tonight? Yes, name and address for the record, please, Ms. Beach.
Good evening, Rosemary Beach, Western Home Community. He's disappeared. I was going to thank him for his service. And, you know, I married one of the good old boys from the service who served in the Navy. And he'll be celebrating his 96th birthday coming soon. There aren't too many of the good old boys from World War II left out there. Anyway, I came to talk about bathrooms. And so that makes you all perk up. I have found in my studies the last week or so that we do not have convenient bathrooms for our visitors nor our people who live here. We do not have bathrooms that are open. We do not have bathrooms that are clean. We need to have, we're a better community than we're presenting ourselves, I believe. We need to have a place for our visitors. You know, if you're shopping, you'll stay longer. As a woman, I know that. If you need to go to the bathroom, you're liable to go home before you hunt one up. So in any event, I would like to suggest to you as a council that perhaps we could have a small study done. No $5,000 or $8,000. It's like a couple of people from the council, a couple of people from the organizations like Community Main Street, the Historical Society, places that have groups of people coming in, and store owners who know they hate to, we hate to ask for a bathroom when we're shopping. I've had more pop out of more gas stations stopping because I needed the bathroom, not the pop. And I think that we should be able to find a location, dress it up, make it a piece of pride, a unit of pride. that we think that much of our people coming into Cedar Falls. So I'm asking for you as a council to put together with a couple of city people and talk about what we can do about it. And maybe there's bathrooms out there, I don't know. I know there's bathrooms around. Not all are open. Not all are open to everybody. And we used to think that one alleyway by the cupcake place was a bathroom in the back, but seemingly that was never a public bathroom. I know that I used it at a time. I thought it was. So maybe we just haven't been thinking about it enough. But I'm asking you to consider doing a quote, quote, task force or just a conversation. And I think that we should provide that for our citizens and for our company coming. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beach.
Now, can I come back for another one, a different thing?
You have 2.5 minutes still.
Well, when you were talking about speed limits, for a number of years going out South Main, they had that short speed limit. It was, I think, 15 miles an hour for a while, and then we got it up. I hope that the statement was when we get something out there at that part of town, that we will get a speed limit that's the same speed limit from University to out to the Western Home. That it's two different speeds. You have, and I'd like to see that go to one, and there was talk about it. They didn't do it. It's always been a two-level of going through there. So while you're talking about it, look at that road too, maybe.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Beach. Does anyone else wish to speak for public comment tonight here in the forum? Okay, seeing none, then I will close public forum and bring us over to special order of business. The first is item 3, which is receiving and filing bids received for the sale of $3.86 million in general obligation loan notes, Series 2022. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Open for council discussion. We have comments tonight. So yes, sir. If you could just provide your name for us and your relationship with the bond sale.
Very good.
Let us know what you got.
Thank you. John Burmeister with the PFM. We're the municipal advisor to the city. So earlier this morning, the city solicited proposals from underwriters on the sale of your general obligation capital loan notes. You should have along your packet here results of sale. And before we get into the results of sale, you'll see that the Moody's Investor Service did reconfirm the city's AAA rating. I wanted to mention that is the gold standard of ratings. There's a lot of cities out there, as you can imagine, are trying to strive to get the AAA, who probably will never get there. So I wanted to congratulate the city for achieving that very rare gold standard rating from the Moody's Investor Service. There's only 2 other cities in the state of Iowa that have AAA ratings. It's West Des Moines and Iowa City. And there's only several hundred of them in the United States. So achieving that AAA just is a reflection of your management in the staff here. And this is Moody's Investor Service independent opinion, which I find really interesting. Is the city's financial position will remain strong given its conservative management and significant financial flexibility. That's Moody's Investor Service's opinion of the city, that you guys will remain strong because of your conservative management. So keep up the good work. I think you should be the citizens should be very proud of you because this is an honor well received. Reason why you wanted to get the AAA interest rate or AAA rating is that lowers your bond cost of when you're doing the capital loan notes. And so today we solicited proposals. We had 7 underwriters signed up. We ended up getting 5 bids. You can see Robert W. Baird, and then they had a whole, what I'll call kind of an army of underwriters here. You can see that there's 24 total in the Robert W. Baird bid. And the other interesting thing is you can see these underwriters are coming from all over the United States. If you kind of count up these different states, there's 17 different states in there. And if you look off to the right-hand side, there's the true interest cost, 2.8327%. So 2.8327%. That's the true interest cost, similar to the APR in a car loan. And if you flip the page, you can see the other bids. The high then was at 2.95%. So you can see here with these multiple bids in the 19 different states, PFM would recommend that you award this proposal to Robert W. Baird and their consortium at a 2.8327%. And I'll open up with any questions that you might have at this point.
Any questions from council on these loan notes? Okay, seeing none, then Mr. Burmeister,
Thank you.
You're off the hook pretty easy tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion and second on receiving and filing the bids. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on the item? Okay, if nothing from council, then what's been moved is to receive and file bids received for the sale of 3.8 million general obligation loan notes, series 2022. It's been motion and seconded. And since it's received and filed, does it need a roll call vote or voice vote? Okay. So this is a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass then, and we receive and file those bids. Number 4 is a resolution directing the sale of $3.86 million in general obligation loan notes, series 2022. This is a follow-up from the previous item here. Is there a motion to approve?
So, second.
Motion and seconded, open for council discussion about the sale of these loan notes. Seeing none. Anything from the public on this? Okay, nothing to add, Mr. Burmeister, on that? Okay, so with that, it's been motioned and seconded, and as a resolution, this does require a roll call vote.
Ganfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Nay.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And over to item 5. This is a continuation of the public hearing of the FFY 2022 Annual Action Plan for Community Development Block Grant and Home Consortium. Continuing from the last council meeting on the 5th of July, there were some questions from council members, and so I know staff was doing some work to get those questions answered. And we have Michelle Beasley from Planning Department, and we would love to have you enlighten us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Mayor, and City Council. As mentioned already, the City Council continued the public hearing for an annual action plan at your last meeting. As directed by the City Council, these are the main points to discuss tonight. City Council asked what type of outreach we had done for the project, for the additional annual action plan, as well as the consolidated plan. And these are the lists of outreach that we did, as well as partners to help promote a survey that was done. The main way of gathering information for the con plan was to hold focus groups with agencies that serve low to moderate income. We had 28 agencies participating, consisting of 36 people. We thought it'd be helpful to also go through the HUD national objectives. All actions must fall into these objectives. The HUD requires 70% of the funds to serve the low to moderate income. We are required to show how we meet these objectives, how we're approving to meet these objectives in our annual action plan. As mentioned, or as in your packet, we have updated the memo that was in your former packet. There is a math error for the total of the fiscal financial year 22 budget. With carryover, this year's budget is $323,801. Nothing else has changed. Carryover is very common for each year, and we want to make sure we're meeting the HUD standards to stay within the 1.5 times the annual allocation. Once we prepare a proposal or a contract, staff will provide that information back to you for your review and approval. Staff has also found to keep these very general helps us meet the HUD requirements. So moving forward on the last thing to talk about, page 20, that was a continuation of a discussion of the barriers for affordable housing and the progress that we have made to reducing those barriers, and the updated paragraph on page 20 has been done from the year before. The Housing Commission recommends approval of the annual action plan, and with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Beasley. With that, I'll move us over to 5B, which is public comments. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item tonight? Seeing none, then that takes us out of the public hearing and brings us into a resolution, item, or 5C, resolution approving the FY23, FFY 2022 Annual Action Plan for Community Development Block Grant and Home Consortium. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded, open for council discussion. Yes, Councilor Whitworth.
Thank you for correcting that math error. It does look a lot better with the correction.
You're welcome.
I have a
Councilor Harding.
question, just for curiosity's sake, to learn more. Let's say that we had approved it last time and it went ahead with a mathematical error. Would it have to come back to council? What would happen if it had gone forward? I'm sure, errors happen. I'm not trying to hammer on that. I'm just curious.
The error was more in the staff cover memo. The totals for each of the activities haven't changed, and they were in the annual action plan that way. So it was really just in that staff cover memo.
Okay.
So no, wouldn't have been an issue.
It wouldn't have been an issue. Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
thank you for the update there. I was looking and reading in there what they refer to LMI areas of town, low and moderate income areas, and I'm looking at this map outlining the particular areas, and there are definitely areas in there that would not be considered low and moderate income. I'm curious, how often does this get updated?
It's about every 5 years, so the update that happened on that was based on estimates from the American Community Survey. So I would imagine that HUD will advise us once official census information is out. They'll advise us that we need to do a review and do a map update.
Okay. How much bearing would that have on the programs here? I mean, apparently not. I mean, go ahead.
I don't know if it would change the program since we have an approved consolidated plan about the different activities. It might just change where they're eligible. So for example, in past years, we've done a sanitary sewer lining project, and we're only doing those in some of those LMI areas shown on the map. So it might say some neighborhoods aren't eligible anymore if they come off the LMI map, for example.
For grants' sakes and things like that? To get grants? And
To do anything under the CDBG funds
Okay,
that
okay.
are allocated to us.
Okay. And then likewise, on the future land use map, they had references to areas downtown 1st to 7th, west of Hudson, east of campus, University Avenue, I believe it was. And looking at that, of course, my printout's black and white and very gray, but I didn't see too many high-density areas west of Hudson. I mean, it's very specific in little block areas, or it's not just kind of a generalization to say west of Hudson we want density?
We have a slide that might show it in color for you that we could go over. Michelle prepared a slide on that.
Okay. Well,
So as you can see in the slide, the high density is kind of a maroon color. And so it is one area, and it's already mostly built out.
so how often is this? When's the last this has been updated?
The entire map was adopted in 2012 with a comprehensive plan, and then from time to time, we have land use map amendments. Sometimes you see those with some rezoning proposals. So every once in a while, there are updates to it based on a council action.
So thinking of our visioning plans that we have for downtown and for College Hill, and this would dictate some of the character areas. I would think that to be accurate, we need to update this, and it might be worth a referral to look at some of the specific areas where we should consider updating, particularly low-density areas that might not be low density.
When we adopted those vision plans, we specifically talked about how those would apply for the areas of the vision plan applicability. So maybe one thing I could offer is just making it well-known that if you're referring to this future land use map, and you're looking at the College Hill area or the downtown area, you might also need to refer to the vision plan.
And as we're having a conversation that's starting to drop into future land use maps, I would want us to stay focused good on the annual action plan and then narrowly looking at the approval of this item, so. But certainly.
Yeah, that's
open
fine.
to-
I just, it was in there, so I looked at it and they referenced high-density areas and so on, and I thought, well, some of those are not labeled high-density. They should be. Okay, thank you. I yield the floor.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
I have a question. It's on the low and moderate income area. It's on the last page of this, number 5. Is it everything outlined in pink all through the town? You call that low and moderate income? Because some of those houses over here are 400 and 500,000.
Yeah.
And I know that my house is in there, and mine's really not too bad. I don't consider myself low income, but it looks to me like we've just added on a bunch of area here that doesn't really, is not low and moderate income. So I don't understand how you would pick these areas out
So
and
we
call
did,
them that.
okay, we did not pick those. We followed HUD guidelines on how you come to identifying what qualify as low and moderate areas using census block information. I agree, it's a little questionable about some areas included, but we followed the HUD standards, and if you would like me to be prepared with more information about what goes into that, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not prepared to do that tonight.
Well, I'm just so curious because, like I said, it's homes out by the Aldrich School, and those homes are brand new. I wouldn't call that low and moderate income.
Right, like I said, I would agree that there are some areas where you wonder how did that get included, but we did follow the HUD guidelines in order to prepare that. What I could say further to that is, for example, at the last meeting when I talked about how when we proposed a park project, that was met with a lot of questioning from HUD about whether it, met certain criteria. One of the areas we talked about was the park space that we have there next to Aldrich. And we had a fair amount of questioning about, well, does that really serve low and moderate income, even if it's in one of the LMI areas meeting their standard? So that's the types of questions we're seeing back from HUD too.
Well, I can see why if they drove through those neighborhoods, you would say this isn't low and moderate income. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Schultz.
but the projects are happening all throughout the city, correct? Not just in these highlighted areas?
Just because they're highlighted doesn't mean a project will or won't happen. It kind of depends on I'll pick on the lining as an example. It's kind of a good one. We've funded 2 lining projects over the past couple years here through this 5-year plan. And we're limited to proposing that in spots where we need to do the lining, but also they're in an LMI neighborhood. So, for example, we wouldn't do one out in the Aldrich Elementary area because it's all new pipe. Lining isn't needed. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Cyrus.
I just question the map, that's all. I just wish the map was a little closer to what reality was. That's all. That's all I have.
Can I clarify a question?
Please.
Councilman Sires, you said the map or the math?
The map.
The map.
Yeah, if you look at this map, the places that it shows is low and moderate income.
I understood you said
excuse me.
math with a T.
No,
TH.
map
Map
with a P.
Okay. Ms. Sheets, I believe you said this was 2015 or 2012? No, that was the land use. This was 2015?
The LMI map, I believe, is 11 to 15 or 16.
Okay, so they determined in 2011 effective until 2015? Or, shouldn't this be updated to be kind of with the times? Because we're 7 years old on the...
It was a couple of years ago that HUD notified us, you need to review your LMI map, you need to use this data to do it, and here are the criteria. So that's why I'm saying I'm sure we'll be hearing from them soon about needing to review it again.
But the effect on the rest of these numbers is not there. Or it's not a deterrent, or,
Correct.
okay.
If the areas were to change, we just might have to do a project in a different area than we had been planning, maybe.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Schultz.
is this map on the HUD requirements, is it based on a percentage of the size of the city? And then we have to take that area and plug it into places?
I'm not prepared to go over the criteria that HUD had. I don't know that offhand. So I could answer that in a follow-up.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else that we need in order to make a decision on item 5? Okay. Seeing none, then I'll, do you have any public comment for this? I don't think we've gone there yet. Okay, seeing none, then in 5C, that's resolution approving the FY23 annual action plan for community development block grant and home consortium. It's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Ganfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Nay.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us to a new public hearing on the status of funded activities for the State Award of Community Development Block Grant CDBG CV2 funding relative to the CARES Act. Is there a motion to receive and file approved publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We do receive and file then. And do we have any written communications filed, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And for staff comments tonight on this item, is that Director Sheets?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
please,
you.
Go ahead.
I'll just go over a couple points in the staff memo, just for the sake of the public hearing part of this. Council recalls that we received some CDBG funds from the state as a part of the response to the pandemic. And in January of 2021, the city entered into a contract identifying the various areas that we might be spending the money. Some of that included some city-funded initiatives or city benefit, I should say. Also, some included schools and then service agencies as well. The state requires, as part of the CDBG program, that once we get to 50% expenditure of funds, that we need to hold a public hearing, just, I believe, probably for the opportunity of any public comment on it. I think what's been unique about us is we've updated our plan twice already, so we've had some public hearings and information's probably already out there about what we're doing. But anyway, as a general description, so we're not changing any numbers today, we're not proposing that, we're simply required to hold a public hearing that we're at the 50% mark. We've actually requested, we've submitted our fourth claim, we'd be at about 61% of our total funds. So we're waiting for that reimbursement pending this public hearing. So a general description of remaining work in terms of service agencies, this is actually the activity that has seen the least activity out of it. Not exactly sure the reasons why, whether some of our service agencies just thought that there might be more need than there actually is, or what's happening that way. But we have reached out to some of our service agencies that have not spent anything to find out whether they plan to utilize it or not. I think as you get further away from maybe the active part of the pandemic, if you will, I think we're still in it. It maybe gets harder to have that link back. So we'll kind of see where the service agencies go. The city component of that, we're about 70% complete on what we identified as things that might be of benefit for the city. We pretty much focused on equipment or communications type of needs. So as you've seen in some of the amendments we did, we have changed that because as things have changed, we've said, well, we don't know that we really need to spend money on this particular item anymore. But then we have found other ones, well, hey, it would be a benefit to have this. So that's all been handled in previous amendments, nothing changing tonight. Our remaining expenditures continue about multi-factor authentication, where we have a contract. We're looking at some electrostatic sprayers, and then there's the administration part that comes with that. And the schools, that activity is the most complete. It's at 95% complete. And with our most recent amendment that we did, that helped two of the schools adjust what they were planning to spend funds on. And they are hopeful to get that done this summer. And then we'll have the school component hopefully at 100%. So a couple other things in the memo, but you can read through those if you'd like. We're recommending that we hold the public hearing, and we just simply move forward at that point, giving the state the documentation that the council held a public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Director Sheets. With that, now being in public comments, does anyone from the public wish to make a comment in this hearing? You're not seeing any, so I'll consider the public hearing closed and bring us over to Part 6E, which is a resolution approving the status of funded activities for the State Award of Community Development Block Grant, CDBG CV2 funding relative to CARES Act. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion and seconded, open for council discussion and questions. I have one question, Director Sheets. So for the agencies that aren't using the funds, is there a milestone or mile point where we are going to potentially pull those funds back and then use them in the city rather than just lose them?
The
Do we
contract.
have a game plan?
Yeah, we're trying to get a game plan. I did ask the state about doing a future amendment. If we're hearing back that they're not using them, the state at this point is wanting to slow down on doing amendments because we have about a year left on our contract, I believe it was. I would have to double check that. And I imagine what the state might be looking to do is, okay, if they've got some unspent funds, are they going to offer a new program, or what are they going to do so that they don't lose some of this CDBG money?
Okay, thank you.
So I didn't directly answer that. I don't think. It's still kind of up in the air.
That's enough of an answer. So from council, questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded to approve the status of funded activities for the state award of CDBG CV2 funding relative to the CARES Act. It's a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote.
Ganfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 7 is a public hearing on a proposed rezoning from R1 Residence District to A1 Agricultural District of property located at 2209 North Union Road, which is the old American Martyrs property. So,
Good
is there,
Receive and file.
so it's a public hearing, which means, is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now, Mr. Weintraub, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have this evening rezoning over on North Union Road. The property is owned by Sean and Paula Kelly. The request is to go from R1 Residence District to A1 Agriculture. The property is about 9.84 acres. You can see it's located in the northwest portion of the city, just about at the city limits. This map identifies the red shaded area as the red shaded area is the area that's going to be rezoned from R1 to A1. And then there's a deep line that shows a lot that will go to the A1, and the purpose here is to allow one house on the property. It will not, right now the zoning doesn't match up with the lot that they're proposed. The rezoning to this district, the comprehensive plan and future land use emphasizes single-family residential in this area. The A1 zoning is appropriate at this time for a single residential structure because there's no sewer and water service in this area. The property has access to North Union Road and will share an access drive with the Martyrs Retreat property. And only one house will be allowed on the lot under the A1 zone. The recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission is approval of RZ 22002, a request to rezone approximately 9.84 acres of property located adjacent to 2209 North Union Road from R1 Residence District to A1 Ag District. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wajau. So with that, does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item in public hearing? Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and take us over to 7E, which is passing ordinance amending section 26118 of this Code of Ordinances by removing certain property located at 2209 North Union Road from the R1 Residence District and placing the same in the A1 Agriculture District upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, open for council questions and comments? Okay, seeing none, then we already did public in the public hearing, so it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Ganfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass, and that takes us over to our final item in this section, which is item 8, a public hearing on proposed amendments to Chapter 26 zoning of the Code of Ordinances relative to Planning and Zoning Commission review of site plans in the Downtown Character District. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motioned and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass then. Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed on this?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. And for staff comments tonight, we have Karen Howard. So the floor is yours, Ms. Howard.
Good evening again. Tonight we have this ordinance that the Planning and Zoning Commission considered. It was a petition from the City Council for a zoning code amendment to reconsider having the Planning and Zoning Commission review site plans in the Downtown Character District. At their meeting on March 23rd, staff brought a number of different options for the commission to consider, also left it open for them to have ideas on things they would consider with regard to this particular petition from the council. At that meeting, they decided that they would like to focus on new buildings, having Planning and Zoning Commission review new buildings in the Urban General 2, and in the storefront areas of the Downtown Character District, and then directed staff to bring back language changes to the ordinance, which staff did on May 25th. We brought some language back for them to consider. They agreed that was per their direction, and so they directed us to set a public hearing for their June 8th meeting. And at that meeting, they recommended approval of the zoning code amendments. Just to bring you back to those areas where this proposed amendments would apply, this would be just for new buildings located in the areas that are kind of red and yellow and orange on this map. These are the Urban General 2, and storefront areas in the Downtown Character District. So there were two main changes to the ordinance. In the ordinance itself, each zone requires that the Planning and Zoning Commission review includes a description of process for site plan review. So there are a number of different zones that require P&Z and council review. So we added a paragraph in the Downtown Character District to note the specific rules for the Downtown Character District. This would be similar to the Mixed Use District and other Highway 1 districts that also have site plan review requirements. And the number 2 main point was added a paragraph in the site plan review section of the zoning ordinance, noting the general procedures in cases where site plans are to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And those procedures would be the same for all those districts that require P&Z and council review. There were other minor changes in the ordinance for clarity and consistency. All those changes were highlighted in the memo. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. So once again, the Planning and Zoning Commission, on a vote of 9-0, recommended approval of the proposed ordinance amendments to the zoning code, and they forwarded it to you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Howard. And with that, does anyone from the public wish to speak on these proposed amendments to Chapter 26? Seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed for item 8 and bring us over to 8E, which is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 26 zoning of the Code of Ordinances relative to Planning and Zoning Commission review of site plans in the Downtown Character District upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, open for council discussion. Who would like to start? Councilmember
I
Hart.
just have a question, probably for Attorney Rogers. So I'm okay with this. It is what it is. My question is, what if someone has purchased property, they intend to build something, and they follow the ordinance to a T, and they do everything, and then it goes to P and Z and council? Is there a legal standing that council can deny it if they follow the ordinance? I mean, or does it have to be rubber stamped through?
There's a concept known as vested rights, that if the project gets far enough along under the existing ordinance language, then they would vested rights to, as long as they abide by the language under which they develop, they would be allowed to proceed.
Even with a council refusal?
Right.
That's what I thought. I was just curious. Thanks.
That's Councilmember Cruz.
Mr. Mayor. The language here, new buildings, how do you interpret an expansion of a floor plan of an existing building? To me, that's a new building. I mean, is there a square footage amount that's allowed before, or how much expansion will trigger this P and Z review?
The Planning and Zoning Commission very specifically said that they didn't want to see site plans. They didn't need to see the site plans for expansions of buildings. These were just for very new projects, brand new buildings. I think they felt like the rules in the zoning ordinance in the character district were specific enough that would guide that project for expansions or remodels of existing buildings.
Okay, what about if they add residential units to a building that is not residential? To me, both of those scenarios, if you expand the floor plan, that starts to affect parking, other criteria for the downtown, crowding and so on, and adding residential units. And I'm basically paralleling what the character district parking ordinances talk about. They talk about renovation and use of an existing structure in which there is no gross floor plan expansion, and it stays or remains non-residential. But as soon as you make a residential addition to a building, it changes the complexion of the ordinance. So I see, based on your comments here, I want to propose an amendment, Mr. Mayor.
The question for City Attorney, if we propose amendments, does that kill the entire item? Then
Go back to planning and zoning.
Right, so substantive change would require it to go back to P and Z for consideration.
So just to be aware, and certainly have the right to propose an amendment, so
Sure.
what's the amendment proposal?
Well, I propose to amend not only new buildings, but expansion and floor plan footage, and any additional residential units added to a building would trigger planning and zoning review.
Did you catch that, Madam Clerk?
Can I ask a question?
Not yet, please.
Well, it's-
I need to make sure that we understand what is being brought forward here.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I have is a motion to add expansion of floor plans or additional residential added. But you didn't say how much added floor plan, just any added?
Any additional residential, if there is none there, or you add more residential, you add more parking requirements. That should be reviewed by planning and zoning. You expand a floor plan, similar to other code provisions that we have, but again, I'm copying out of 26-196, character district parking. If you have considerations of minimum parking requirements when there is no gross floor area expansion, but if there's an expansion, you need planning and zoning review.
So it sounds like it'd be any expansion. Is that, so with that, before we get into a discussion on it, is there a motion to, for this amendment? Or second for this amendment?
Second.
Is motion second, open for discussion?
My question was, are you basically referring to number 5 on this list then? Where it says all changes to existing buildings?
That's what it looks like to me.
The P and Z went with only number 3, correct? Where number 5 was an option that they may have looked at.
Right, they looked
And-
at all those various options.
Right, so would number 5 basically include what Mr. Cruz is talking about? Because it includes all changes to existing buildings. Well, all changes would include residential.
Can I reply, Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Yes,
Councilmember
Just
Cruz.
as an observation here, projecting signs, I don't know, I mean, that can be included if we feel it's relevant. I understand the downtown changed some of their sign requirements to remain historic. I'd be curious on that, but it does mirror number 5 pretty closely unless we take out the sign language. Yeah, actually, I need to know more details about number 5, really, because you're saying all changes to existing buildings. I'm looking at expansion of floor plans, again, copying or mirroring 26-196 parking. No gross floor plan expansion if you do expand the floor plan. I think that's prudent. See what's going on.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember.
so the point was, is that these 5 were what was put in front of planning and zoning already, right? So those folks that serve on that commission have already had the time to review and consider and discuss these options, and this is what they came back with, is what was in front of us. Are we going to continue to kick stuff back just because we didn't get the answer that we are seeking? I feel like that's what's happening, is we're not getting what we want, so we constantly kick it back. Is that not what we're doing?
Well,
They've already had it in front of them, so why are we, I mean, obviously, whatever is legal or whatever is great, but we've already, it's almost verbatim with what number 5 is. So I don't want to waste, those folks' time. I don't want to waste our staff's time. I don't want to waste our citizens' taxpayer money. At some point, we have to stop, let's move forward. They've already looked at that, and that's not what they came back with.
Well, I'd have to question if what the intent here then is to say, we don't like number 3, keep coming back until you give us number 5,
Well-
which kind of negates the value of the Planning and Zoning
Mr.
Commission.
Mayor, no, that's not what I'm asking. I read and referenced numerous times here the parking requirement changes. It says the reuse and renovation of an existing structure in addition to those on Main Street identified in item C1, in which there is no gross floor expansion. We expand the gross area of the building. That is, in essence, a new building stuck to an old building. And then it goes on to say the use is or remains non-residential. If we add residential units, let's say they're condos, that's a new structure. They are a separate entity with a parcel report, so that's a new structure. They should be specified in here as requiring planning and zoning review because it triggers parking scenarios. And just because these 5 things were given to P&Z to consider, there could have been a number 6, a number 7, and that's our job to review the criteria here and fine tune it so that we have the best as possible code going forward to protect the downtown. Because in essence, you take an existing building and add on 3 floors to it, that's a new structure. But it's not spelled out here in that fashion. So I think it's important that we include the 2 items I mentioned.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Hunting.
couple things. One, the old buildings are grandfathered in, so they could they could renovate and put a few things in there. They're all grandfathered in. The only time the new zoning kicks in is when a certain percentage or is redone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but would it be, my question then would be, if the new zoning, if someone were to redo their property, their existing property, and the zoning rules kicked in, would it then go back to P and Z because the zoning kicked in, or would it not go back to P and Z? It would only go to P and Z if it was new.
So the rules that are in the zoning ordinance apply, all the rules apply. So the triggers that are in the zoning ordinance for, that Mr. Cruz referred to, trigger certain parking requirements. Those are requirements. So regardless of whether P and Z is reviewing it or not, they will be required to provide that parking.
Okay.
So the rules are, I think one of the things the commission considered was they felt like the rules were a lot more clear and objective, so there maybe didn't need to be the scrutiny of the extra review. What they did feel like was if it's a brand new building, there may be a lot of factors to consider. They felt like that was maybe warranted.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And my last thing would be, again, we're micromanaging what we want or what some of us feel like we want, and we've sent it back. They've made some changes, which I can agree with on the new building, and I think we need to vote on this ordinance as it is, and it passes or it doesn't pass. That's where I'm at.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sanders.
I do attend the planning and zoning meetings. I can't actually remember, maybe Karen would, that they discussed all these things, and I'm not saying they didn't. I remember that they had general agreement and everything seemed fine. So to me, whether we add on number 5, which is a little more strict, or this one, as others say, they do their due diligence, and I truly didn't have any problem either way. I seconded Daryl to open that up for discussion. It can be changed down the road, and I'm good with it either way.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilor Bird.
Quick question. If you don't include on number 5 all changes to existing buildings, in other words, they're going to do a large remodel, so it's not a new building, so therefore it would not have P and Z or council review, so therefore the public would not have any input on changes. Is that correct? Because it would only be up to staff approval.
So the rules in the zoning ordinance are the rules. So if they follow the rules that are in the zoning ordinance, then the purview of P and Z and councils to say, yes, they did follow the rules. So I think, there's not a lot of discretion in the new rules. So we took out a lot of that. Has to be compatible with adjacent buildings, and those kind of language came out of the code, and now there's just really specific rules. So I think the Planning and Zoning Commission felt like there's enough specificity in the rules that for remodels of existing buildings, they didn't need to see every site plan. Does that kind of answer your question?
Not at all. I was asking whether or not the public would get any opportunity for input, and it sounds to me like they would not.
Not if they didn't go through P and Z and council. That's
The
correct.
only way to be able to protect the public so that they can have their input would be to include item number 5, which was all changes to existing, because that way it would incorporate both the new and any changes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Harding.
but it's already been stated that if they follow the rules in the ordinance, then they could still do it. So that's the whole point. We're back to the same thing, is that you follow the rules, they're black and white, they're written, and you're approved or you're not.
Yeah, it seems to be that we circle around the same discussion every
Yeah.
time.
And we can see it different, I respect that, but again, we should zero in and focus on what's at hand here, not whether we agree philosophically with the ordinance and how form-based zoning works, but whether we are going to pass the ordinance in front of us, which is very specific. So I would move to call the question.
I need a second? No,
I
okay.
believe so.
2/3 vote, Mayor.
2/3 vote. So calling the question, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, raise hands for aye. 1, 2, 3. Just seeing 4. So 2/3 vote fails. And so we continue.
Mr. Mayor?
I would note that having that point of the public, does the public have any say in it at all? It's kind of a misnomer because the public has the ability to comment in on the overall standards. And that's the most important thing here. And the idea, one of the main points of form-based zoning and of going to this form structure was to take some of that arbitrary political decision-making out of the process so that developers could build with a minimum of unnecessary friction. And it's not, in my view, it's not the staff approving the plans, it's the plan or the law or the zoning approving the plans. So I just want to make that note that it's not staff arbitrarily deciding whether something gets passed or not, which sometimes seems to get thrown about here, that the staff is just arbitrarily on their own making that decision when they're not. The law or the ordinances are clear, zoning is clear, and if they're not clear, we can change them to make them more clear. Yes, Councilor, or somebody commented earlier. Was that Councilor Cyrus?
What'd I say?
Nothing, apparently. Okay, so
Quick question.
Councilor Rivera.
If you vote yes on this item, then it goes to number 3, that P&Z would go back into review on new buildings. If you vote no, it goes back to the current code, which there is no P&Z review at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
Mayor. I proposed, and we had a second on an amendment to number 3, essentially. It does somewhat parallel number 5, but it's not all changes, even though in some ways that should be considered, because an example of an office building with 10, 12 employees switching to a restaurant that has a seating capacity of 200-300. And I know planning and zoning commissioners have said they want to see what works and what doesn't work, and it was always told to them that they could tweak these rules and regulations going forward. So this is a scenario, if you want to call it a loophole, I see a problem here when it's only new buildings. And I keep referencing other parts of our code that talks about no floor expansion. If you expand the floor footage, you're bringing in more customers, more diners, more entertainment people, and so on. It's going to start to affect things, as well as residential units being added. You have a one-story office building, for example, that just happened downtown, and let's say they put in 3 stories of condos above that. The way this is worded, that's an old building that got remodeled and there's no oversight. I think it's important for the citizens, as Councilwoman DeBurse suggests, and us to review, and the other merchants downtown to know if they're going to be have competition for their space, whether it be or their customers. So I'm adding a criteria to number 3. It looks a lot like number 5, but it's not. It doesn't talk about projecting signs, site changes and that. It's floor plan footage and residential units, very specific. So
I have a question, one last question for Councilmember Cruz, if that's okay.
Certainly.
If we add that in, I guess the question, I don't understand what it's trying to achieve, because if they follow the rules, they still get to build it. We can't say no.
we get to review new buildings.
Correct.
We have just referred back to planning and zoning parking requirements, so they could change. Here, you say it's black and white. It's not black and white, because how do you treat, let's say the Maid-Rite building is now, they add floor space, a couple thousand feet around it on the ground floor, and they add 3 stories of residential units.
Yes.
That's going to affect the downtown. Public should know, and planning and zoning will hear from the public to say, this is going to crowd out our downtown, make it more congested, make it not such a nice environment, and so on and so forth. So
But-
there's transparency.
It
It doesn't hurt. And if planning and zoning looks at it and says, it's fine, when it comes to us, we followed the rules, or the developer followed the rules, done deal.
Well, if they did that, it would trigger the new zoning ordinance, and they would have to follow the rules written, and it was already, if, you can't tell them no if they follow the rules, then it's illegal. So, again, it's a defeatingness, it comes back around to the point of form-based zoning. So, I guess we just see it from two different angles. So I'm not going to go on about it, but we should vote on the amendment.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I do want, when we say there's no oversight, that is not true. It's in the ordinance. The ordinance is the oversight, the work that went into that. So this perpetuation of lies and sneaky stuff is
I'd like
not-
to please not use the term lie ever
Okay.
at a council meeting. Thank you.
Well, the perpetuation of false information is not okay. Call it what you want.
Councilmember Schultz.
So I'm certainly interested in development of downtown and making sure that we have residents that live down there. We've got patrons that go down there. We've got a good community. And I think that was the aim of form-based zoning. So if there's something that we as a council see or citizens see, we've got a right and ability to come to the city and say, hey, this is no good. I don't want the Maid Right to have a 3-story building or anything else. I'm for the form-based zoning that is set to give them the specifics of here's what we're gonna do. If, and I'm just as hypothetical as some of the things that we've talked about, if Maid Right would make that decision and less people come downtown or there's less parking spots, the market is gonna drive who comes down there, who doesn't come down there, and what businesses survive or not.
Exactly.
We had 700 parking spots in 1985, but we had 6 businesses downtown, right? So we've already experimented that way. This isn't, I believe, an experiment. I think this is based on the knowledge and the recommendation, and I'm ready to vote on this and move on.
We do have the amendment on the floor that we would need to address first. So, Madam Clerk, could you read that amendment as you have it written?
I just want to be clear, we're not voting on the ordinance
Correct.
tonight. If we amend it, we're not voting on the ordinance. It has to go back to P and Z.
Correct.
Okay. So the amendment would be to add to the ordinance any expansion in floor plan and additional residential being added.
So it's been motioned and seconded, and all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so let's see, a raise of hands for aye. 1, 2, 3, and for,
No,
oh, 4. And then for nay, 1, 2, 3. So that amendment does pass, and then what happens at this point, Mr. Rogers? Do we stop debate now and it automatically goes back to P and Z?
I hesitate to say unless there are other amendments to be made.
Don't say that.
Are there other amendments that are desired?
Only question, actually.
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
On the paragraph after the list of 5, it talks about, Mr. Rogers, you added an additional step here, if I read this here. Does that have to be codified, or is that just kind of a given there?
I think my recommendation was to make the process consistent with the other
MU.
P and Z council review of site plans. So that it's the same all across the board whenever P and Z considers a site plan that goes on to council, that the procedures are the same. That was the intent.
So it wouldn't be the commission making a decision as a appointed body, it'd be the elected officials making having the final say.
Recommendation up here, just like always.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question, but again, we're going back to if they follow all of the specific details in the ordinance, we have to say yes, correct?
Under that hypothetical, I would recommend that the project be approved.
No, yeah, so there's no have to.
There's no have to, but essentially, if they follow the rules and we say no, they could take us to court and win and be able to build it still.
I don't want to address a hypothetical like
Okay,
that.
that's fine.
But my previous answer stands. I would recommend approval if a developer followed our ordinance.
Okay, thanks.
A footnote, if I may?
Please.
There's always intangibles. You cannot black and white write down every scenario. That's why the law books continue to expand and expand and expand, and you have court cases and court cases. A lot of gray areas, a lot of things that may be detrimental to downtown that we have to look at that would cause us not to approve a project. So it's never a certainty, so.
All right, so no other amendments then for tonight to send back on this item? So, Mr. Rogers, how would you recommend proceeding?
So I think this would be a petition to P&Z for as long as staff understands exactly what's going back to P&Z to consider for recommendation. And then P&Z will take it up and it'll come back here.
Okay, so we still need the, well, there was the amendment, so we do approve it with the amendment or vote in favor with the amendment, and then that automatically goes back to P&Z? I'm just not sure what the way forward is at this point.
So I think the council is unable under the ordinance to approve the ordinance as amended. So with, as long as staff understands the amendment that council wishes to send back in the form of petition, then P&Z will know what to act on.
Okay, and it would have to be a petition then, because that's the only venue
Right.
that we can pursue.
Right. Is staff comfortable with the direction?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's just it's an unusual situation.
It is.
Okay, so I think we're good then, unless staff has, or council has any objections.
Could I just ask, would it be helpful if we referenced what I continue to reference, 26-196, item C 2B, get down all the letters, where it's saying, for the parking, no gross floor plan expansion and non-residential. I mean, does that help planning and zoning or staff? Because that's where it originates from.
Now we're in a procedural conundrum because council already approved the
Okay.
amendment as stated.
Well, I'm just,
So it would not.
okay, got it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we're outside of the debate land, and so we need to move on to the next item.
So, yep.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. So the next item that we have going into old business is passing ordinance 3013, amending Chapter 23, Traffic and Motor Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances relative to prohibiting parking on portions of South Lawn Road upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any council discussion or questions? Any public discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motion and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us over to the consent calendar. And these items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And we're very happy to do that if anyone wants. Does any council member request to pull an item from 10 to 13? Okay, seeing none?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, before we go on too further, I just want a point of order, clarification for my mind on item 8. Just not comfortable with where we left it. Attorney Rogers, can you explain? So we had a resolution on the floor and it was amended. What did we then do with that resolution on the floor
Ordinance.
officially?
So
I mean, the public hearing was open, correct?
It was closed.
It was closed.
Okay.
And so council acted, and it wishes to petition the P&Z to consider the ordinance as drafted as council amended it.
Perfect.
And that was sort of like an automatic petition because we had no other
Yeah, just hadn't seen it before.
place to
so
go. I don't think any of us
It's,
had.
it's real unusual.
Appreciate the clarification. We can move on. I do not need to pull an item from consent.
Okay, so if no items are pulled, then I will read those. Item 10 is approving recommendations relative to boards and commissions. I want to thank Ms. Hale and Ms. Hostler for their service on the Community Center and Senior Services Board for volunteering for that. It's a while in the making to get some folks there. 11 is receiving resignations from boards of commissions. Sarah Corkery off Parks and Recreation Commission. I want to thank her for her service these past several years. 12 is receiving and filing communications from the Civil Service Commission relative to certified lists. And 13 is approving applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so those do pass, and takes us over to the resolution calendar, where these items will be acted upon by a roll call vote in a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And we are very happy to pull any of those items, 14 through 24. Does any council member wish to pull an item?
I'd like to pull 16 and 17 as a unit together for same question.
Okay, so unless council has any objections, we'll view those together. 16 and 17, we will have to actually vote on them separately, but we can
That's
consider
fine.
them separate.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Harding, or excuse me, Councilmember Cyrus.
number 14, please.
14. Yes, okay. Any others? Seeing none, and does anyone from the public wish to pull an item 14 through 24? Okay, seeing none. So I'll read those items, minus 14, 16, and 17. 15 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a cooperative agreement with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission for FY23. Item 18 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a service product agreement with Amperage Marketing for the FY23 digital advertising. 19 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a Red House studio lease relative to the use of that space as a studio space in conjunction with Hearst Center's Visiting Artist Program. 20 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a subrecipient agreement for a federally funded project for Operation Threshold for CDBG CB2 funding relative to the CARES Act. 21 is a resolution approving and authorizing expenditure of funds for the purchase of 2 polymer mixing pumps for biosolid handling operations for the Water Reclamation Division. 22 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement to the PSA for Snyder and Associates for administration and design services relative to the Oak Park Boulevard Sewer Replacement Project. 23 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of 23 owner purchase agreements and approving and accepting 23 temporary construction easements in conjunction with the Main Street Reconstruction 6th Street to University project. And finally, 24 is a resolution receiving and filing and setting August 1st, 2022 as the date of a public hearing on proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2022 Sidewalk Assessment Project, Zone 5. Is there a motion to approve these items minus 14, 16, and 17?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
all voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that goes back to item 14, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement with the University of Northern Iowa relative to a city employee climate survey. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Open it for council discussion and questions. I'll note that our HR manager, Bailey Schindel, is here tonight to be able to answer questions that you may have. So, Councilmember Cyrus, the floor is yours, sir.
The question I have is, I would like the city employee climate survey to include the people who were employed here in the last 2 years. I think that'll really open up to some different things, and those people are important as well. That's the one thing I see the fault in this, and it's got to be truly full anonymity where they don't know who. No one will ever know how they filled out their surveys. That was kind of a thing that worried me.
So, thank you for your question, Mr. Sires. To answer that, that would change the scope of our project that we have brought forward to you today. We might have to take that back to UNI Strategic Marketing Services. I can offer to you that the city has done kind of exit interviews, if you will, and staff reviews that information and makes any changes or addresses those situations should they arise. And that is a voluntary survey, confidential survey.
So we aren't on a time limit on this for when we have to have it done by. If, I mean, it's for a suggestion to have it as also including past 2 years of employees or people who've left in the past 2 years, that certainly could be the council's option to vote down this contract and bring it back with that item added to it. We wouldn't be able to amend it tonight because it's a contract and would require renegotiation, but it certainly is in the realm of possibility if we can find those employees, those former employees. But let's see how we do this. Council, do you want to discuss that, of
Yeah,
adding that in?
actually,
or vote this down?
I guess it'd be a question, just make a referral to have a separate survey of exit interviews? Or, Mr. Sires, if that's something,
Would have to be done by this same group, the outside group, UNI.
same question, very similar questions, I mean.
It would just be added on to this same thing. I'd like to have it done all at once.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned a time frame. What time frame? Because, I mean, you're saying this contract's kind of set. We're altering the contract, is that what you're referring to?
It sounds like we'd be altering the contract by adding to the scope and the number of people.
And then
who would
you'd
be-
then avoid the contract? Is that, Mr. Rogers, or just change it enough that it's not relevant, we gotta start over?
Yeah, you and I wouldn't be bound by a unilateral change that we made, so we'd have to negotiate different terms under the scope of services.
So would it be just an amendment, and they would respond, say, okay, this is how much more it would cost to bring in X employees?
I would favor the mayor's approach, just vote it down, and if the majority wants to go that route, that's direction for council, for staff to add that provision and renegotiate the contract, bring something back to you.
I have, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please, Councilmember Harding.
I have a concern that if you add 2 years or however many, that you skew the actual results of current employees. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to getting some sort of survey of past employees, but they would have to be 2 separate surveys, because otherwise you want to get a climate audit of the current climate, and it's impossible to do that with 2 years. I mean, does anybody know how many employees have left within the last 2 years, or where we're at with that, or how we would even do that?
It kind of gets to be an interesting question on how big the scope that are we looking at. You know, right now, the city is approximately 200 full-time, permanent part-time employees. But we actually, our finance staff does about 600 W-2s every year because of all the coaches, the seasonal staff, and all. So how big of a scope is this? Are you looking to go back 2 years on those folks as well? I honestly would recommend that what we do right now and is from this point forward. I think it's going to be very challenging to go back and try to find out 2 years ago where some of these folks may be, especially even if they're just seasonal or permanent part-time. That may be challenging. And just moving forward, the other thing that I wanted to touch on is one of the things that we have to realize is if we're going to move forward with the climate action survey is what the consultants told us, and many of them have said, is since the city hasn't really done this with the employees before, what you're going to see is this first one is really going to end up with a baseline. You're going to end up with a baseline on that data, and then moving forward, we'll have to see where we go from there. And I think, Mayor, you had mentioned that that's similar to what UNI uses, is they had that baseline and how that moves forward.
Right, both UNI and CFU, really similar processes.
Mr. Mayor.
And I'll just note real quick, what this accomplishes, or what the goal of this was, is under the council goal-setting document that we approved last year. It had, just for the timeline, the FY23 detailed objectives were to conduct a workforce climate assessment, employee satisfaction survey in FY23 to identify areas for improvement in human resources management and employee relations. So as long as it occurs during FY23, we're meeting the council's objectives. Yes, Councilor,
I just think it's quite important, that's all. And if you took the 200 full-time employees and then just, if you broke off the last 2 years of those people, or they left to go to another job, whatever we could find would be good enough. But I just think they need to be included, that's all.
The other thing is just how willing are they to take the survey?
I
You know,
think-
what would be the participation for an individual that hasn't worked here 2 years?
Well, we just have to find out. Maybe they wouldn't want to fill it out, but maybe they would. That's all.
And then does that skew the results? That's the other.
Mr. Mayor?
yes, Councilor Dunn.
So I am not for that. You know, I work in a fairly large organization, I would say similar to the city. There are exit interviews done when folks leave our organization. I think that suffices. As a person who has taken similar surveys in my job, I find it somewhat I would find it somewhat disrespectful to go searching out those folks who are no longer on the team. That is my concern. Exactly, you could skew the results. We're trying to get the current climate of our current employees who are currently in the trenches in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I do not support going and chasing down former employees. And also, it's kind of like, you know, the surveys that we send out when people are seen in our clinic. A lot of times the people who fill those out are people who are angry. So you're not getting a true sense of the overall feeling. It's the folks that have an axe to grind that typically want to fill them out. The people that are happy and carrying on with their life, they're probably going to throw that right in the garbage.
So a question for Ms. Schindel. With this survey, do we have enough data from individuals who've left the city that we could add that on and provide any kind of narrative for them?
No, kind of mirroring what Councilmember Dunn has said, the responses that we do get back are very limited. There would not be enough data to include in the survey. If we did, it would likely skew the results.
So it sounds to me that there's a interest in finding out, you know, of course, why people decide not to stay employed with the city, but I appreciate we're not going to be able to get a perfect result out of this survey. The idea is, as was mentioned, is that having that baseline to work forward from, and would this, as it's written, would this contract provide enough information for us to identify areas for improvement in human resources management and employee relations? And I'd have to suspect it wouldn't have come forward to the council unless HR believed that it does provide that it does provide a tool for us.
If we went with the current employees climate survey like we've proposed tonight, I think it would be a huge benefit. It would give us firsthand data from our employees that are currently employed. It is conducted through a third-party consultant, so employees have that anonymity where they can feel free to speak their mind. Those results go directly to that consultant. And we can then take that data that's provided to us by the consultant, and we will review the results and then potentially improve any deficiencies that we might have.
And to note, it's not listed in our goals, and that's not in the contract, but typically with UNI, they're doing this either annually or biannually with the organizations.
It could be any of those of our choosing if we choose to do that.
Okay, so this wouldn't be a one and done. This is all basically the start of an ongoing process, hopefully.
Correct.
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
My understanding that this process, maybe not specifically like this, but it's been done 6-8 years ago, and there's a series of these that have been done over the years. Any past people can comment on that. That's what I'm told. So
there's a citizen survey. That was
CFU does one.
Just repeating what I heard. So I guess you might call it hearsay. But Ms. Schindel, is it possible in the data you talk about employees that have left, that have terminated, that are full-time people that are no longer with the city, having that as a separate category? Again, that goes to Mr. Rogers' point, we'd have to change the scope of the contract.
Correct.
But that's a subset part of this survey. I think it's relevant. Why do people leave? That can be done. Or is it up to the consultant to say how they would do it?
I'm sure it could be done, but again, it changes the scope of what we have brought forward today. That would be something we would have to go back to you and I and discuss those terms with.
I wonder if we're talking about we need to do some things different in order to capture that information. I wonder if we might consider that a follow-on contract. So
Well,
approve this one, and then if we want to try to capture people who
I
left.
guess pending what this says, I suppose. And then the exit interviews, I've never seen an exit interview. I'd like to see those. I mean, they're not sequestered. I mean,
I think they would be.
well, you redact names and, you get the flavor of the arguments or the flavor of the reasonings. I mean, we're looking at the possibility of adding it on to the scope of this contract. An exit interview would be similar to the consultant coming up with questions, why did you leave? Why were you terminated? Why,
Well, I have two responses. One is, I think the survey professionals probably should advise us if there'd be meaningful data from former employees or how they typically set up these instruments. Maybe check with other entities, see how they do it. And maybe that's the direction from council tonight is if you're wondering about that, that's a good idea or not, just table this matter, approval for now. Staff understands, they'll consult with the expert and see if that's the kind of data point that would be valuable, and then come back and report to you next time. That's an option. But to your point about exit surveys, the reason there's a third-party consultant in this case is to ensure anonymity of responses. And so redaction isn't going to take care of that problem because you'd be identifying something about the work, something about the person that would destroy that, and they'll be less than candid, which destroys the whole purpose behind the exit survey. And your management team, if they're doing their job, is going to take that information and adjust accordingly and address issues that are raised. So I don't know what specific role council would have in that process without destroying anonymity.
okay, I agree with that. I do like the idea of tabling this to get some feedback from the consultant through Ms. Schindel. If the rest of council would want to go that path, that way we get a good data set to figure out what we want to do.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The other option is if the council's comfortable, they could approve this tonight, and at a future meeting, the staff could bring back a change order that would actually address what the council's discussed here if they're looking at do that. So it's something that we could end up going backwards on 1 or 2 years if that's something that interests the council as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember.
I think this is an item I've been kind of looking for a little while, wondering, I would like to see it get done. I wanted a question for Ms. Schindel. Is this specifically for the Public Safety Division, or is this for all HR? I didn't see it specifically in Exhibit A, but it was in the proposed memo.
So this would be for all city employees. We would offer this survey to, with additional questions, like a subset of questions going to public safety additionally, separately.
So just 2 flavors, or would it be catered beyond that to different departmental staff?
Just those two kind of flavors there.
Okay.
One for everybody, and then public safety has additional questions they will answer.
And that direction for public safety was driven by the review discussion that we wanted to see more information about public safety specifically.
I'm excited to get a baseline for that. Do you know how many other entities, cities, for example, the university has surveyed in this fashion to provide some comparative baselines this year?
Yes, I believe it was between 250 to 300 that they have reviewed other cities and similar organizations.
So that presumably should give us some actionable data even without a year-to-year comparison, correct?
Correct. I know CFU utilizes their services. They've been doing this for roughly 30 years.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
I'm for moving ahead with this, but I would like to follow it up with some other things so we really get a good indication of what's going on. so.
Excellent.
Question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
Ms. Schindel, what if, or can an employee refuse to do this? I mean, what do you do in that scenario? I mean,
This would be a voluntary survey. We would encourage participation as much as we could, but ultimately, it is a voluntary survey.
And you couldn't hold them accountable because it's meant to be confidential anyway. So,
yeah. We would know, would we know how many people declined to fill this out?
They would give us the number of people who took the survey.
The raw numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
okay. Any other comments for this? Then we have the motion on the floor, which is resolution approving and authorizing execution of the agreement with UNI for the city employee climate survey. It's been motion and seconded and it requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that takes us to item 16 and 17, which we'll discuss together. Item 16 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a master service agreement with Heartland Business Systems, LLC, relative to the migration of the city's computer network to Microsoft 365. And 17 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a service product agreement with Interconnects relative to the replacement of the city's door access control systems. Is there a motion to approve these two items?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded, open for discussion of both, and then we'll vote on them separately. Harding.
My question was, when I was going through the packet and studying everything, I saw that we didn't have their certificate of insurance. And my question is, what are the ramifications of us approving something without that certificate of insurance? What's the precedent for that? And is it better to wait, or I'm just want to cover my bases on that?
Yeah, what we've done before is if they have the contract and we've agreed on the terms, we sign that contract, but we wouldn't give it to them until we had the certificate of insurance in hand. And as of today, both of those have given us all their paperwork. Heartland has the non-government immunity in with the insurance department right now. I haven't heard back from them, but everything else has been okayed by risk management.
So essentially, we hold on to the contract until they provide that.
Yep. We wouldn't sign that and send it on to them until it was in place.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that item? Anything from the public? Okay, so item 16 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of the master service agreement with Heartland Business Systems relative to the migration of the city's computer network to Microsoft 365. So motion and seconded and requires a roll
Mr.
call
Mayor?
vote.
I had my finger up, you didn't see it. Quick question.
Yes.
The monthly fee we pay Microsoft, I'm assuming that's based on workstations or laptops or number of
Users.
software users.
Yep.
Can we save, or would it be much saved if we shared laptops or workstations so that Microsoft is charging us per computer, which
User.
is
Per user.
it's not per computer.
Not per computer.
That's different than my firm. So, okay. We wouldn't be, okay, thank you.
So it's been motioned and seconded, the resolution approving and authorizing execution of a master service agreement with Heartland Business Systems LLC relative to the migration of the city's computer network to Microsoft 365. Motion and seconded requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And then over to 17 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a products or service product agreement with Interconnects relative to replacement of the city's door access control systems. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I apologize, we already had the motion in the second, so the first one applied. I'm sorry. Moving over into the next item, we have allowing bills and claims for July 18th, 2022.
So
Is there
moved.
a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? Any from the public? This motion and seconded requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Cyrus,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any council referrals tonight?
Mr. Mayor, if I could jump in here, just real quick. Back to item 14, just want to make sure that the staff has a proper direction. Are we looking to move forward with a change order or something else? I heard Mr. Sires and Mr. Cruz both say something else, but is that something that the council would like? And I just thought council referrals may be the time to do that.
That's a great idea. Yeah, so we'll entertain that as a referral. If there's a motion forward for what you would like to see as the change order addition, feel free to propose that now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sires.
I'd like to see it include the people who had worked here for the last 2 years.
So the motion is to include in this contract previous employees from up to 2 years ago. So is there a second for that?
I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, second for discussion, and Councilor Harding.
I'd be open to it as long as it's a third subset, a separate thing, because, I mean, let's be honest. We all know what some of those results are going to be due to past circumstances that are unfortunate, and I really want to see results of current, and past is fine. I want to learn from the past and get better, but I want to make sure that I understand where we're at currently as opposed to where we were. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I want to make sure if we do it, that it's a clear, there's the one that everybody takes, there's the one that public safety takes extra, and then there's the one that former employees take. So that would be 3. That's the way I would want to see it, because otherwise if it's all together, we don't know where we're currently at. So, but I'm okay with it.
No, that's fine. I would like to have it not be a multiple choice or anything. I would like to have them put down whatever they felt like. That's all. And then it would be deciphered by the people doing the survey. That's all.
So yeah, so it'd be.
It'd almost be like an exit interview. I'd just like to have it separate so that they knew that they were 100%,
I'm okay with having it. I'm 100%.
That's all.
Think you can learn. I just want to make sure that
So
we categorize
I'll take that
it.
as a friendly amendment then, that's how that would
Yeah,
be
no, that's what it is.
forwarded
That's
then.
fine.
Okay. Yes, Councilor DeBeer?
I think you need to clarify too, that whether it's part-time, full-time, seasonal. I think you're referring to just only the full-time, but
I am.
it wasn't clear, so I thought.
So
need to
friendly
clarify.
amendment to that again then is it's only for full-time, unless I hear objections, within the past 2 years, and it would have to be separate from the main interview.
Mr.
Well,
Mayor.
just be another category or
It's
however
just a
you want to look
category,
at it.
right.
That's
So
fine.
we can sequester those. Yes, Councilor Cruz.
So to Ms. Schindle's point earlier, do we got to redo the contract? Or a friendly
We
amendment?
passed the first one.
The contract's been approved this evening, so what we would do is probably just bring an amendment to that contract forward with this extra duties that we're talking
And
about.
then we have to approve that, or is it just?
That's correct.
And is that
Because
the
it's a-
change order you're referring to?
Depending on the cost of the change order, if the cost is under, I forget what the threshold is, we wouldn't have to bring that back. But if it exceeds that amount, we would bring it back.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Dunn.
and if I need to make whatever, an addendum or whatever, but can we also include from these experts whether or not this, like, how relevant this information is? If we're going to possibly pay more money, can we include that in the, in this referral?
To have them come back
I would
to us
assume that you
say
and
whether
I
it's
doing
useful?
250 to 300 of these surveys, in the last year, that they would know if this request, to include former employees, how useful that would be, like, to us? Like, is that useful data?
I would like to see it, wouldn't others?
Well, or if CFU's been doing it, like she said, for 30 years, perhaps they could give us some insight as to whether they do that.
And there may be a recommendation from the folks that provide this that say, hey, it's really not useful data or something like that. But we would bring all of that information back to you.
Okay, yeah, so to have the recommendation, and it'd be up to the council to decide whether to take that recommendation or not. If they say this is spurious information, it's not helpful, we can still approve it and have it taken if we want.
I would like to see it.
Okay, so with that, is there anything else we need to discuss for that referral? So it's been motioned and seconded to send to the consultant a request for a change order for, I think change order, whatever it's called, a thing,
Amendment.
an amendment, to include employees, full-time employees who have left the city within the past 2 years, as of the date of the survey. Or not, oh my gosh, are we getting that too much detail? Okay, probably too much detail. Let's say 2 years.
1st of July.
July, up to July 1st, 2 years ago as of July 1st. And what else? What was the other stipulation? The recommendation on the validity of that info, in their opinion.
Well, and then it's a separate
And that it's a
category.
separate category of information. Okay, does that cover it?
Got it.
So motion and seconded, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that does pass. And any other referrals tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Gainfeld?
I didn't formulate it a ton beforehand, so I beg your indulgence there. With Mrs. Beach's recommendation, I'd like to refer to probably CRNP or maybe Public Works about a discussion to see whether council would direct us to look at public restrooms. Just add a line item.
Public
on.
restroom study?
Yeah.
That's it.
I've heard it from more than one, including Mrs. Beach, so.
Actually, yes.
So referring to
Would it be Public
Community
Works
Relations
or
and Planning?
It'd be Community Relations and Planning, wouldn't it?
or
To
public-
discuss where it might go and all that beforehand?
I'd second that.
Probably, yeah, if we're talking about kind of the downtown area, since that's the area of interest.
Yeah, I don't have restrooms on my list of items for the committees. So, yeah, well, Community Relations and Planning, so referred to that group to determine whether a study is warranted. Okay.
Talk about it.
Yep.
Talk about
I'm
it.
op- I'm open.
Motion,
Mr.
is there a
Mayor.
second? Okay, so any further discussion?
No, I'm open to talk about it.
All right, so motion and seconded to refer to Community Relations and Planning, a potential or recommendation from them about doing a study, a restroom study downtown. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Any other referrals? Seeing none, then any council updates tonight?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Dunn.
Folks are getting excited about our river project, and I was just hoping to get maybe an update from staff about the status of that, just to keep the public in the know.
Sure. Yeah, as Councilmember Dunn noted, with lots of excitement, so we're also excited at the staff level about this project. As the council recalls, you approved the contract with the EDA at the last meeting, and so we needed to turn that in along with a couple other certifications to the EDA, which we did last Friday, and that sets the stage for them wanting to schedule a meeting with us to go over a lot of pre-project aspects. Intercog has done this before. They warned me it's about a 2 to 3 hour meeting. So we've organized that for early August. But here's the schedule that we worked on and conveyed to council when the grant was submitted to the EDA. So this is the schedule we're working under. And so with that, we entered into a contract with our design engineer back on April 18th of this year for them to make updates to the plans based on things we already knew we wanted to change, and then have those plans ready here by July, so that when we had the contract approved with the EDA and we're ready to move forward, we can turn that over to the EDA for review and minimize any delay in this schedule as much as possible. This is a tentative schedule. We'll keep working to hold this, but until we have that meeting with the EDA, I wouldn't be able to give the council a good update on how much this might adjust or what adjusts.
Thank you. So the bids, will we start getting bids? I see it says bidding on river project completed. When will we ask for the bids to start?
So that is the consultant putting together updated plans. The EDA will have to review them. I'm not sure how long their review will take, but what I've told our design engineer is I'm wanting those plans. Staff's already reviewed the plans and provided comments back about clarifications we still think that are needed or additional information they need to provide. So they should be wrapping up those plans now. And then I want to be ready right after that conference call with the EDA to turn the plans over to the EDA.
Okay, thank you. And then, so we're obviously hoping to get construction going this year still.
Yep, that's our
obviously.
goal.
Okay, and then, so it's Riverwise is the consultant, right?
The design engineer,
Okay, the
yep.
design
Mhm.
engineer, okay, and then they will, be a part, and I ask because I'm ignorant, they'll be a part of the whole, as the project is being built, they'll be a part of that project as the expert in that area, correct?
Yes, we anticipate still continuing with the contract that was approved back on October 18th of 2021 for construction oversight, and we had an option in there about how much we utilize their staff versus our staff, but definitely the design engineer and the design architect will have to be involved in several points.
Okay, so like when the rocks go in and all that stuff, they'll be the people.
Yes.
Okay.
The plans also need to be very clear so anybody can interpret it.
Sure, okay, okay, I appreciate that.
And Director Sheets, can you talk a little bit about the public fundraising component? Like, what's the total that they need to raise and that they're gonna have to be working on now?
In our CIP, I believe we have 500,000 in there for the fundraising. If we go back, I think it was August of last year, maybe the council discussed with that fundraising group about that amount, and that amount stayed the same. It was a discussion about the time frame of providing that funding. So nothing has changed since that August discussion. I believe it was August.
Okay. So still at that $500,000 public commitment that's gonna need to be, or private commitment's gonna need to be fundraised, which has already made some significant progress, but just want to make sure folks knew that that was still a need for that project. So any other questions on that? All right, any other council updates? Okay, seeing none, then over to staff. Any updates for us, Mr. Gaines? Okay. So now, I'm going to make a motion for executive session, or take motion. This is item 26, an executive session to discuss property acquisition per Iowa Code 21.51J to discuss the purchase or sale of particular real estate only where the premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price that the government body would have to pay for the property or reduce the price the government body would receive for that property. Is there a motion to move to executive session?
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded, and requires a roll call vote.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I have to sadly say that we need to use this space for that. The library we typically use is not going to be open for us this evening. So that will be our executive table, and we'll need to have the room cleared. But once we're done, we will be back for just a moment to close the meeting. So you're welcome to hang out in the parking lot if you want.
Yeah, Andy. Hang on in your car, bro.
Hang out in your car. If not, we understand. Have a good evening if you do leave. Thank you.